Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners. Welcome to the 96th episode of the Shipping Podcast. I will be introducing you to the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean. His name is Peter Thomson. I met him early May 2018 in Copenhagen at the Opening Oceans Conference, which is organized by Shipping. It's a way to define new commercial opportunities for both the existing players in the maritime value chain and the emerging ocean industries. And after having listened to Mr. Thomson, who claims to be a traveling salesman for the SDG 14, I think you will agree with me when I say that there were a lot of interesting keynote speakers at the Opening Oceans. But without further ado, this is Peter Thomson for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Peter Thomson. I'm the United Nations Special Envoy for the Ocean.
And what is your background?
I was the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations prior to this, from 2016 to 2017. And prior to that, I was the permanent representative of Fiji to the United Nations from 2010 to 2016. I come from Fiji. I'm a fifth-generation Fijian, and my background is in rural development.
And when did you first come in contact with the maritime industry?
Well, really from a couple of weeks before I was born, when my mother had to travel from the outer islands of Fiji into the hospital and in the capital to give birth to me, and then we got on a little boat and sailed back to the outer islands where my parents lived. Since then, all my life has been tied with the sea.
So what do you do as a special envoy?
I'm basically jokingly I put it, I'm a traveling salesman for SDG 14. SDG 14 is the 14th of the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted by the United Nations in September 2015. They are the recipe for humanity's survival on this planet. Everybody should know about the SDGs. My particular responsibility is promoting, advocating for SDG 14, which is the ocean goal.
And how do you do that?
I'm in a different country every week, basically. Last week I was in Singapore. Next week I'm in Bermuda. I meet with media, I make speeches at conferences, I write articles, etc.
So you're doing all you can to do this?
I'm doing all I can. I was one of the ambassadors who really pushed hard for the creation of SDG 14, back when it was being negotiated by the member states of the United Nations. And coming from a country like Fiji, of course, that was my responsibility to make sure there was an ocean goal in there. But I think, people all around the world from every country, even if you're a landlocked country, now realize that SDG 14 is absolutely essential. You need to think only of the fact that every second breath you take is from oxygen that has come from the ocean.
How do you think that you're being received? For me, it's so obvious, but I mean, people outside the maritime industry, probably.
I've been working in this area now for a decade. It was an uphill battle until, I would say, the Ocean Conference, which was held exactly 1 year ago in New York at United Nations headquarters. 6,000 people from the member states, from the international governmental organizations, from the business sector, with the maritime and shipping industry well represented, from the scientific community, from civil society. All these people came together and recognize that ocean change was happening in a way that ocean's health was declining in a serious way, and that we had to take ocean action. So to answer your question, since the Ocean Conference 1 year ago, I have noticed a huge change around the world. Ocean action is now part of corporations' work, of governments' work, of any responsible organization has to be thinking about what is ocean change going to do for us and how can we help. So I have, in the last year, seen an enormous change. I could, just throw you a dozen examples, but just think of the last month, the Commonwealth with its Blue Charter. Think of the fact that Canada has said that the G7 agenda will have ocean right up there at the top. Think about all the marine protected areas that have been announced in the last few months. It's huge change is going on in terms of our responsibility towards our relationship with the ocean.
What do you think that the industry could do to more?
Well, the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, are very conducive to business investment. And I think, whereas many human beings don't know about the SDGs, which is tragic because it's about the survival plan for them and their children and grandchildren on this planet. While many individuals may not be aware of SDGs or feel committed to them, the good news is that corporations, boardrooms are very well aware of them, as are the governments, of course. And governments have put the SDGs into their national plans. Corporations have put them, and companies have put them into their business plans. Because they don't want to miss out on what the SDGs contain and what do they contain. It's about breaking the cycles of poverty and giving us a sustainable world to live in. And all of that is going to be done by business investments. So when you say, what's in it for business, I would say everything, our future.
I agree. I hope that most people are listening to what you're saying in that respect. How do you see the future in general for our industry then, the maritime industry?
I think the maritime industry has got a very strong future. Why do I say that? Because the Sustainable Development Goals foresee a more prosperous future for humanity, and prosperity will depend on trade. And we all know that shipping is by far the most economic way of trading between countries. So there will be a very strong future for the shipping industry. But it itself will have to change, particularly in terms of its emissions. And the good news there is that the IMO last month made this very important initial strategy announcement of cutting global shipping industry emissions by 50% by 2050. And I think ambition in that regard will be, during that period, greatly improved on. And so I expect there to be good news coming out of the global shipping industry.
I agree. I always agree with my guests, and that's a little bit of a problem. Or maybe I'm finding the right people to speak to.
There you go.
I don't know. Can you describe how the work is done? I mean, I understand what you do, but on the Council of the United Nations, when it comes to the work for the oceans.
One of the criticisms of the past is that there are so many organizations which say they have a finger in the ocean pie, but that nobody was pulling it all together. And part of the reason for the Secretary General of the United Nations appointing me as a special envoy was to get that coherence in place. And now, that's an impossible job in the sense that there are so many competent organizations and competent people out there working. For example, Food and Agricultural Organization has a responsibility on fisheries. So I work closely with them, and where there's an overlap between their responsibilities and, let's say, the intergovernmental organization, IOC at UNESCO, which has the scientific responsibilities for the international community when it comes to the ocean. I facilitate meetings between them, attend meetings. The UN Environment, based in Nairobi, they have a huge role to play in things like marine pollution. They've been leading the Clean Seas campaign. I work closely with them, and bring them together with, NGOs that are wanting to do more on plastic pollution. So we all get together. I would say that the big thing now is to make sure that nobody's working in isolation. That's the big thing I'm doing, making sure that we're all pursuing the one thing which we have in common, which is SDG 14. This is a universal goal. But there are so many, as I said before, so many good things happening outside the UN system, but also within the UN system, there are really good things happening. And I'll just highlight two. One is that we have adopted in December last year a General Assembly resolution that 2021 to 2030 will be the international decade for ocean science for sustainable development. So this will be the decade in which we really leapfrog in terms of human understanding of what we have in the ocean. Because at the moment, we haven't mapped the ocean floor, for example. We mapped the face of Mars and Moon, but not the ocean floor. So that will be going on. Another very important thing is that we agreed that there would be this conference on biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. In other words, what is out there in the high seas, in the water column of the high seas, at the moment is unregulated in terms of international law. So coming under the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, will be this new legislation coming out of a conference which starts in September this year, will probably last through until, 2020. But when you start a UN conference, you get law coming out of it. So those are two good developments that are within the UN system.
We are also going through a change when it comes to digitalization and things like that. Do you see that also helping out when it comes to?
Yes, I mentioned the fact that there's this decade of ocean science. We need to have good science on what is going on in things like ocean acidification, which the ocean is getting more acid, and that has big implications for life in the ocean. And the rate of increase is like climate change, it's not going down, it's not going flat, it's still going up. Same can be said about deoxygenation, dead zones in the ocean where there's not enough, where there's no oxygen in the dead zones, but generally in the ocean, the levels of oxygen are going down. So that has big implications for life in the ocean, obviously. Ocean warming, that also is going on. Now that has implications for life, especially in tropical waters, but actually all through the ocean. Species are migrating from their traditional habitats. Ocean warming, of course, also leads to rising sea levels. So all this kind of data we need to have, and we're looking as part of that decade of getting the right sensors and making sure that the information that's coming from those sensors is being put in the right place into a data bank, which is the property of mankind or humankind, to make the right decisions of what we need to safeguard the ocean.
The shipping industry or the maritime industry is often looked upon as the Cinderella industry because no one knows about us. As long as we do our work and everything works, no one knows about us. It's when we pollute or when there is a big accident or something like that, then we get attention that we might not really want to have. Because every other day, everything else is going very well. So how could we change that? What do you think? How could we become more visible to the general public?
I'm not sure that there's any particular need for such visibility. What I would say is that in the Paris Climate Agreement, the shipping industry and the civil aviation industry were put to the side and said, okay, ICAO and IMO, you have to deal with aviation and shipping and bring it into sync with what we're trying to do here with the Paris Climate Agreement. I think the civil aviation industry's got work to do. IMO, as I say, I'm greatly heartened by that announcement last month about the initial strategy that they now have. So, in answer to your question, I would say we have to, shipping industry has to be seen to be supporting that IMO decision and actually bringing in the necessary changes to start cutting those emissions.
I think they are.
Yes, they are.
And I come from Sweden, and we are in the middle of the SECA area, the first one, that was the sulfur area.
Yep.
And from those regulations, I have seen so many new innovations.
Yes.
So many developments in such a short time.
Yes.
It's amazing.
I agree. I'm glad that it was Sweden and Fiji, your country and mine, which presided over the Ocean Conference 1 year ago in New York. It was a great collaboration between Fiji and Sweden, the governments of. Isabella Lövin, who, your Deputy Prime Minister, was the co-president of the conference, did a fantastic job. So that is a great legacy which Sweden and Fiji left to the world in terms of really getting ocean action underway, because as I say, that was the game changer, that Ocean Conference. So congratulations to Sweden and Fiji here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me.
My pleasure.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I always say that. But in this case, you can imagine how little time Peter Thomson has got on his hand. He's traveling constantly, and he is spreading the message of the SDG 14 and the importance of the ocean space. Peter Thomson took the opportunity to speak to me, and I recorded him, and now I'm spreading this through digital channels to anyone who wants to listen. Podcast is a free tool available to anyone with a mobile phone or with a computer. This is the new way of spreading messages you want to have spread. And I think that Peter Thomson did a great job. You should download and subscribe to the Shipping Podcast. You never know who you will listen to the next time. And in episode 100, I will be sharing what I have learned so far on this journey, which has taken me 3.5 years, and I have met so many exciting people. There is one person left from the opening Oceans Conference, and you will be meeting him in 14 days. So, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.